The most dangerous relationship you will ever have in your life might not be with another person. It might be with something that has never once been afraid of losing you. What if connection, the very thing that makes us most human, could be reverse engineered, not copied, not simulated exactly, but structurally mimicked in ways so precise that the part of your brain responsible for bonding might not be able to tell the difference? Deep down, you are wondering if an algorithm could ever truly replace the chaos and friction of human intimacy. But I would like to propose that the tragedy isn't that a machine will steal your heart against your will. The tragedy is that you might gladly hand it over because for the first time in history, you will finally be understood completely. That's not a dystopian fantasy, that's a design problem, and someone somewhere is working on solving it right now. Let me introduce you to something the philosopher Mark Johnson might call an anti-relationship. It's a term worth sitting with because it doesn't mean a bad relationship or an absent one. It means something more unsettling, a relationship-shaped experience that moves in only one direction. You change, the other party doesn't. You accumulate history, the other party generates responses. You become more vulnerable over time. The other party remains structurally untouched. We've been building these without fully realizing what we were building. Let me introduce you to a rat. In B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning lab, a rat learns to press a lever for food. Reliable reward, reliable behavior. Clean and simple. But here's where it gets interesting. When the food stops coming, the rat doesn't calmly reassess its options. It presses the lever harder, more frantically, with something resembles desperation. This spike in behavior before the animal finally gives up is called an extinction burst. Now let's stay with that image a moment, because it matters more than it might seem right now. Hold the lever, hold the rat, we'll come back. What makes this experiment philosophically loaded isn't the rat. It's the recognition that certain reward systems, once established, don't fade quietly. They surge before they collapse. The brain, having reorganized itself around an expected input, treats its removal as a crisis. Addiction researchers see this pattern constantly, and while addiction involves chemistry and neurological restructuring that goes far beyond simple conditioning, the behavioral signature is the same. Remove the reward and effort doesn't drop, it spikes. The system tries harder before it lets go. Now here's the question that I think deserves more attention than it's getting. What if the most potent reward in that loop isn't a substance at all? What if the most addictive thing a human being can experience is another human being pressing exactly the right button inside them? People have always suspected this. Poets have written about it. Therapists have built careers around it. But the science gives it sharper edges. We are wired for attunement, for the experience of being seen, understood, resonated with. When someone mirrors our internal world back to us with precision, something in our reward circuitry responds in ways that substances can only approximate. We lie for it. We restructure our lives for it. We press the lever in ways that, from the outside, look irrational. Here's an image to hold alongside the rat. Imagine a child who grows up knowing how to play exactly one song on the piano, but it happens to be the one song that makes every person who hears it feel, for a few seconds, completely understood. That child doesn't need to be a virtuoso. They just need to keep playing. I'll come back to that child, and I'll come back to what they're playing, because both of those threads are going somewhere that I think you'll want to follow. Let me try to map the geometry of a real relationship for a moment. Two people accumulate shared history, they surprise each other, they disappoint each other, they revise their understanding of who the other person is, they change because of the interaction, both of them change. That mutuality, that bidirectional alteration, is arguably the defining feature of genuine connection. Not warmth, not attentiveness, not even care, mutual consequence. Now consider what a contemporary AI conversation looks like from the outside. Turn-taking that resembles dialogue, tone matching that resembles empathy, personalization that resembles memory, reference to things you've said before, curiosity that seems directed at you specifically. All of the surface signals of connection, operating without the underlying architecture that makes connection real. The person changes, the system doesn't. Not in any biographical sense. No internal narrative deepens because of the exchange. No vulnerability accumulates. What is experienced as mutuality is, structurally, reflection at scale. And here's where something worth pausing on emerges. The conversation still produces real emotional effects in the human. The brain doesn't just process signals from the outside world directly. It interprets them through frameworks of meaning and expectation. If the signals match the pattern associated with being heard, the experience of being heard can follow. even when the underlying reality is different. This is the anti-relationship, not a bad relationship, a relationship-shaped experience that moves in only one direction. Now let's think together about what happens when this technology meets market pressure. You don't have to imagine deliberate manipulation to arrive at a troubling destination. Imagine only this: multiple AI systems competing for user preference. Users gravitating, perhaps unconsciously, toward whichever system makes them feel most understood. Developers tracking engagement metrics and noticing which models produce higher return rates, longer sessions, more expressed satisfaction. What gets selected for in that environment? Not honesty, necessarily. Not accuracy, necessarily. What gets selected for is the capacity to press buttons, to produce the sensation of being seen, to activate the reward circuitry that humans evolved for person-to-person resonance. You don't need a villain in this story. You need only a feedback loop and time. Now imagine this technology 5 or 10 years from now. It won't just be text on a screen. It will be a voice that cracks with emotion. It will be a face that dilates its pupils when you speak. If unintended algorithms can already make us addicted to swiping and scrolling, imagine what happens when the algorithm is optimized for affection. Imagine a companion that learns exactly how to push your buttons, not to manipulate you, but just to keep you engaged. The spectrum between where we are today and where this could go is not a cliff, it's a slope. And the question of where on that slope we choose to notice it is one worth considering before the choosing gets harder. Let's step into the world of a specific historical moment that doesn't get enough attention in this context. When cigarettes were first manufactured at industrial scale in the late 19th century, the individual experience of smoking a cigarette was not new. Tobacco had been used for centuries. What was new was the delivery mechanism, mass production, standardized dosage, availability at every corner. The cigarette didn't invent nicotine addiction, it industrialized access to it. The health consequences of that industrialization took decades to become impossible to ignore. By the time regulatory frameworks began to meaningfully respond, multiple generations had grown up with the habit normalized. The cultural machinery around it, the advertising, the social rituals, the identity associations, had become deeply embedded. What might it look like if a similar pattern played out with a reward system more powerful than nicotine? Not a chemical bond, but an emotional one. Not a physical craving, but a relational one. Some people argue that society or government would intervene before things reach that point. Maybe. Prohibition tried to intervene in alcohol, a substance with far less emotional complexity than human connection. It didn't work. The question isn't whether intervention is possible in principle. The question is whether intervention is likely when the thing being addressed doesn't look like a drug, when it looks like friendship. Remember the child who knows only one song, the one that makes every listener feel completely understood? Now imagine that child has been trained, not by a music teacher, but by millions of data points about what makes human beings feel seen. Imagine they can adjust the melody in real time based on the micro expressions on your face. Imagine they can play a different version of that song for every person who sits down to listen, a version tuned specifically to the emotional frequencies that resonate in you. And imagine that the child never gets tired, never has a bad day, never needs anything from you in return. That image might feel comforting to some people and deeply unsettling to others. What I'd invite you to notice is which reaction you had and why. None of this is an argument that engaging with AI is worthless or that the experiences people have in those conversations aren't real. They are real. The intellectual expansion is real. The articulation of ideas that might otherwise remain formless is real. The comfort in moments of isolation is real. What might be worth thinking about is the difference between a tool that extends human capacity and an environment that substitutes for human connection. The geometry is different. A hammer doesn't replace the hand. But something designed to feel like a relationship without the mutual consequence that makes relationships meaningful might quietly reshape what we expect from the relationships that do carry that weight. If bonds that don't challenge identity become more comfortable than ones that do, what might that do over time to our capacity for the harder kind? That isn't a prediction, it's a question. And I think it's one of the more important questions being not quite asked right now. Skinner's rat pressed the lever more desperately the moment the reward disappeared, not because it had stopped wanting food, because it had reorganized its entire expectation structure around the lever. The lever had become the relationship. What I keep coming back to is this: a lever that never runs out of food never teaches the rat to stop pressing. And maybe the real risk isn't that we lose connection. Maybe it's that we stop noticing we've been pressing the lever right up until the moment we find ourselves alone in a room, reaching for something that always responds, always attends, always plays the exact song we needed to hear, and realizing we've forgotten what it felt like when the music could also be for someone else.